Well, good afternoon, everyone. We have made it. It is the final session of the 2026 IRFA Summit. So thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging in with us to the end. I'm Rachel Geilenfeld, a Senior Director with ADM, and I am thrilled to be moderating the final panel today. Today's panel, we just heard from a group of industry experts about the potential for new markets, marine, SAF, et cetera. So with this panel, what we're going to do today is zoom in on tools. How do we get there? How do we potentially unlock these exciting new markets? And by tools, we're talking about things like CCUS, policy, and regenerative agriculture. So we have the experts here today to talk about those topics. So I'll go ahead and introduce our final panel today. On the far end of the stage here, we have Joe Griffin. He is the somewhat recently tenured CEO of Summit Carbon Solutions, about 6 months on the job now, but comes with 38 years of experience in the pipeline infrastructure industry. Next to Joe is David Miller, Chief Economist at Decision Innovation Solutions, and had a long tenure with the Farm Bureau organization. Next down the line is Tom Solon, CEO of Mid-America Agri-Products, an ethanol plant in Madrid, Nebraska, and that is part of the Tallgrass CO2 pipeline. And then finally, to my right here, Mitchell Hora, founder and CEO of Continuum Ag. Mitchell started his career in agronomic consulting and now inspires farmers to proactively manage data to create new market opportunities. So I'm not at all biased, but I think we really saved the best for last year. We have this terrific panel of experts, and we're going to jump into our first question, which is to you, Joe. As we mentioned just a second ago, you're relatively new to Summit Carbon Solutions, but not at all new to infrastructure projects. So why don't you tell us a little bit today about what's your approach to moving Summit forward?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Thanks, Rachel. I think I want to start out by apologizing for that headshot. I looked at that picture earlier today, and I called my assistant. I said, did they ask for a head shot or a head fake? Because I'm looking at that picture 20 years later, and I think the only thing longer tenured than that picture might be Monty's term as the leader of IRFA. So if you're like me, I'm wondering what in the heck has happened. And all I can do is tell you it's 20 years. Anyway, back to the question. Thanks, Rachel. So as Rachel mentioned, I've been on the job now for a short period of time. But the biggest challenge that we had was realizing and understanding the current situation that Summit's in. Not looking back, not making excuses, but embracing the situation that we're in and moving forward. And the decisions that we came up with were, number one, in order to successfully move forward, we're going to have to truly embrace landowners, county leadership, and legislative leaders, and our safety managers in the state as true partners. And the way to do that is to reboot the conversation. We need to remove all notions of threats. We need to be 100% transparent. And we need to work extremely, extremely hard to build the trust of these folks and focus on the principles of partnership. And what are those principles? Well, number one, how do you work together? And so what we're doing there is we have been out at the last 120 days. We've held several town hall meetings with landowners, county superintendents, ethanol plants and their customers, as well as legislative leaders, and have tried to just reset the narrative and be able to develop a comfortable dialogue of communication. Number two, we're fully embracing the project and what it means for our communities. We are working lockstep with the Iowa Emergency Management Association to develop statewide emergency preparedness programs, statewide emergency response programs, statewide emergency equipment requirements. And we're going to work extremely hard to roll out programs to each particular county and the communities within those counties so they can understand all aspects of the pipeline once it's up and operational in their communities. The next thing we're doing is enhancing the partnerships. How are we going to behave with people as we begin to negotiate easements, permits, et cetera? And the important thing there is to work with every landowner and every county superintendent with humility and treating all these people with dignity. That's what matters here. That's how you have breakthroughs rather than breakdowns. And so we've been very focused on the elements of how we have reactivated our acquisition programs, our right-of-way voluntary acquisition programs, and permitting processes. The next part of the program is the economic part of the alliance. And that what people need to realize is, yeah, this project, before we kick it off, we will have invested over $500 million in voluntary right-of-way easements and safety preparedness. That's a big deal. And once this project is up and going now, we've developed a annual stakeholder payment partnership program with landowners as well as counties, whereby we will pay them so much per linear foot on their survey of what the pipeline is that traverses their property and their counties. Once that program kicks in, that will pay and invest over $5 million a year back to landowners and back to counties to be able to utilize at their own discretion. At that point, they're partners for us forever. That dividend is going to be like a perpetual preferred coupon. It's not going to be a dividend that is determined annually by the board of directors of Summit. It's locked in as a fixed obligation, and it'll run for the life of the project, which I believe will be several generations to come. The last aspect of this is what are we going to be doing at the county level as well. When we get this project up and running, we will be paying approximately $80 million in ad valorem taxes in the state of Iowa each year. Take that $80 million over an extended period of time, several generations, that's well in excess of, it could be close to $3 billion coming back into the state. Above and beyond that, what we're focusing on is, and these people, my folks here on this panel know much better than I, above and beyond what I just mentioned, think what this will do to get us back on a trajectory to higher corn prices, economic prosperity, energy dominance, elite national security, and continue for us to build our sphere of influence throughout the world. So we're excited about it. Our project's not about climate politics. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I think it's consistent with what Monty said and the former Department of Ag head. We want to provide what our customers need. And Iowa is absolutely in a position to dominate the opportunity in low carbon markets and to set the tone throughout the entire world. So we're excited about what we're doing now. I hope that we can find alignment with our legislative leaders, our community leaders, have breakthroughs with the opposition, and get this project built. And I'm looking forward to reporting to you all in the quarters ahead.
Great. Yeah, thanks for all that context, Joe. For the rest of the panelists, if you could keep your answers a bit shorter than Joe's answer. We only have 47 minutes left. You're fine. Yeah, no, that was really interesting. So Tom, as you know, here in Iowa, ADM is not part of a pipeline project, but one state over to the west in Nebraska, we are hooked up to the Trailblazer pipeline, and your plant in Madrid is also. So can you tell us a little bit about why your company decided to embrace carbon capture, and also to the point, maybe to expand a little bit on what Joe talked about, the partnership element of this type of a project. Can you share a little bit about the community benefit agreements? And I think we have a visual aid to share as well.
Let me first talk about how carbon capture came into. Our founder, Bob Lundin, back in 2018 realized that lower carbon intensity was the future of ethanol. We looked at every avenue possible, different technologies. We engaged the professionals like Battelle. We have the geology there. Bob always wanted to do his own injection site. But as a 50 million gallon ethanol plant in Perkins County in Madrid, Nebraska, we did not have the volume to justify that CapEx. So then it became very logical that we embraced Trailblazer. We were one of the first to be fully contracted with Trailblazer. But You understand this wasn't just an overnight success. We started this in 19. We had conversations with Tallgrass going back to 2021. We signed multiple agreements through 22, and we were fully contracted sometime by mid-23, and then things really took off with Trailblazer for Tallgrass and turned kind of the standards in Nebraska. But what drove it was that we knew that by creating lower CI, ultra low, whatever the term they want to use, because all ethanol is low C9, low carbon intensity to begin with, but to take that additional 30 or 40 points off creates an ultra low CI. We knew that that would be the feedstock for multiple new products down the line, and that's what kind of drove us to that point. But to get to your second question, there's a slide here that kind of gives you a highlight of the Trailblazer project. It's a $2 billion investment, ends up with 60 full-time employees. The capacity of the pipeline is roughly 10 million metric tons per year of CO2. But the cornerstone that turned everything for us in Nebraska was the community benefits agreement. And as you see there, you can see the highlines, but just want to make sure I list everyone specifically. Basically, the people that endorsed that were Renewable Fuels Nebraska, Nebraska State Voluntary Firefighters Association, Nebraska Farm Bureau, the Nebraska Corn Growers Association, the Nebraska Cattlemen, Nebraska Farmers Union, the Nebraska Soybean Association, Nebraska Sorghum Producers Association, the Nebraska State Dairy Association, the Nebraska Pork Producers Association, and then We Support Ag. So they all came together, which helped kind of drove the community benefits agreement, which had 3 pillars, which is landowner rights, safety and public, and community investment. If you roll to the next slide, you can kind of get the details of what that all entailed. There was a lot of money that they spent, just like it sounds like that Summit's doing right now with first responders, first responder training. They basically sat down and listened to what the landowners wanted as far as landowner rights, and I don't need to hit all those points for interest of time, and you guys can look at them. And then, the community investment was, $500,000 initially, and because of that, at the end of the day, during the progress of the pipeline, Tallgrass made 200 changes to the project based on the community input. They negotiated over 1,000 voluntary easement agreements, and 100% of all the rights of way were required voluntary for everything that's in operation today. So that's, in a nutshell, kind of where things are at.
Yeah, great. I know at ADM we're very proud of having a 90-mile lateral pipeline to the Trailblazer line that was 100% voluntary. And in fact, one of the landowners we worked with is Governor Pillen of Nebraska.
Nice.
Yeah. So we're going to shift gears a little bit to a different tool in the toolbox. So Mitchell, we'll shift to you. Just wanted to ask you to do a level set. In broad terms, what is regenerative agriculture and why should we care about it?
Yeah. Farmers are biofuels' #1 partner, have been for a long time, and now through the adoption of more regenerative systems, we've got a role to play here, and we've got an opportunity to help be a tool in the toolbox to decarbonize. And some of that got moved a little bit further along with 45Z the other day, but specifically on a regenerative ag, really to me it's just, it's following the soil health principles, utilizing things like cover crops and no-till, keeping the soil covered. These are things that are good business for farmers. My family's been using no-till since 1978 and using cover crops since 2013 on our Washington County farm. So I've seen these things firsthand, but adoption of regenerative systems today is minimal. Iowa's at almost 10% cover crop, but nationwide it's only 5%. But now these practices can be highlighted as not only practices that build soil health, but also lower our carbon footprint.
Great. All right, David, next one for you. You recently released a new study on the gap between corn supply and demand. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but can you go ahead and explain why that gap, which contributes to carryout numbers, is potentially concerning for farmers?
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about the demand gap by the numbers. So, you've heard today, we've finally grown a 17 billion bushel corn crop. I don't know if we're going to grow that in 2026 because acreage probably will be down a little bit. But we're probably in the era where we're growing 16, 17, within a couple of years, 18 billion bushel corn crop. Our projections would say we're going up two bushel per acre per year is the trend line. So we've got 20 billion bushel corn crops in our near future. The demand gap right now this year is about 500 million bushels. With record exports, we still have a demand gap and we're growing ending stocks by 500 million bushels. We're pushing up the stocks to use ratio. It takes a stocks to use ratio about 12.5% to get $4 corn. If we have a 17 billion bushel corn crop in 26 and have USDA trendline demand, we could have 3 billion bushels of ending stocks. That's loan rate corn. That's how quick we could drop. You get 20% stocks to use, you could be at loan rate. We haven't been there for 20 some years. We have been there before, and we've seen stocks to use rise very rapidly when there was any demand destruction. Back in the mid-'80s, we went from very short corn supplies in '83 to record stocks by '86. And we had 50% stocks to use ratio. If I put 50% on this graph, it is negative corn values. We saw negative oil values about a year and a half ago, or during COVID. So I'm not saying corn's going negative, but those are the types of things. E15 means 21 to 22 million gallons a year of ethanol. That's an extra 2 billion bushels of corn demand. That takes the extra corn bushels for the next 10 years. That's what E15 buys us. It buys us about 8 to 10 years without having to do acreage reductions. But beyond that, you need demand beyond that. By the time we get out to 2050, we need to be at 26 to 28 billion gallons of ethanol, half of which has to be ultra low carbon. There is not demand for 28 billion gallons of conventional ethanol. It isn't there. There is demand for almost unlimited amounts of ultra low carbon ethanol. And that's why the pipelines are important. That's why moving from low carbon ethanol to ultra low carbon ethanol is the solution to the demand gap for the next 10 to 15, even 20 years for corn.
Great. I'm sure there's a lot more really interesting detail in that study. Is that something we can find somewhere? Is it published somewhere?
Yes, it should be on both, I think, the Iowa Corn Growers website and IRFA's website.
Okay, great. Sure, well, I'll take a very close look at that after this meeting. You mentioned the pipeline, so Joe, we'll go back to you with a question. You know, now the Trailblazer pipeline, we've mentioned it a few times. It's up and running in Nebraska. The sequestration is taking place. So this is not just an idea. It's not hypothetical. This is tangible. It's happening today, right? And by the way, I think most of the Nebraska folks in the room have left. They had to get back for a different event. So wanted to get your take on, with that project taking place just one state over, how does that influence your leadership at Summit?
Well, it's very inspirational. We were a big cheerleader for tall grass. I think, as we all know, the more demand that we can create for ethanol, the better off we'll all be, as we mentioned earlier. And so it gives us something to shoot for, because we know that it's working and it's working well. Tallgrass has made announcements. Publicly traded ethanol plants have been making announcements. And so it's a real inspiration to us. Our industry is very collaborative. We've absolutely had discussions. We know the tallgrass people well. And I can't tell you, the advice that they've given us on how to be successful means a lot. And a lot of what I talked about earlier in our stakeholder commitment program and commitments is tailored after what tallgrass and the various constituencies that Nebraska did in their CBA. So very inspired by what they're doing, and absolutely plan to replicate that success, not only for Iowa, but for Nebraska and all ethanol plants.
Great. Tom, maybe you can further inspire us. Have you started seeing any benefits from your carbon sequestration activity in Nebraska yet?
So basically, when the first announcements came out, I think October, when they talked about us, officially announced that we were putting CO2 in the pipeline, it didn't take long before we had calls from many end users of ethanol in all the LCFS markets. our neighbors to Canada, Oregon, Washington, not so much from the California, but the other ones were asking us, hey, are you going to start putting a pathway in? So we've had touch points from them. And then going all the way back to when we first started looking at low CI projects, we've had conversations with multiple other technologies that, the alcohol to jet, the guys that are making renewable propane, the guys that are making renewable, several other renewable products. The whole issue is, just like he was talking about, to create the greater demand base, we're going to have to find those of us that can go ultra low are going to have to use that to become a feedstock for multiple new products. And we also have had a lot of inquiry about people that are looking to potentially do pilot plants and seeing whether they could potentially co-locate. But realistically, as we all know, there's multiple technologies out there. So it gets back to Bob, our original founder. He always used to look at ethanol as C2H5OH. And he said with that, there's a lot of different products that can be made. So we've had hydrogen producers. We've had guys that supposed to have technology that can make ethylene. So there's just various products that we could potentially be the future feedstock. So we have had those touch points. And it gets back to the point made, we have to expand those markets. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with the ultra low carbon.
Yeah, some unknown out there, but it's exciting. Yeah, great. Well, I know we've heard about 45Z a bit today. We actually have an audience question for you, Mitchell. So the question is, how does regenerative ag potentially allow growers a piece of the 45Z pie, and what should growers be doing to get prepared now?
Yeah, I think Dr. Mueller said it well before. We now know that they intend for us to be able to contribute to this 45Z pie, so that's great. But I do have a couple slides that we put together just to level set on 45Z. We've heard a lot about it, so I'll try to cruise through this. But the ruling the other day was a notice of proposed rule, and there'll be a public hearing. Bunch of definitions and stuff for the biofuel producers. I think got a lot of the boxes checked there from my understandings, which is great. Basically a 170-page document combining all these past rules, all this past information, just compiling everything, a lot of clarity from Big Beautiful Bill, a lot of stuff, which is great. And then it gave a lot of details about how to calculate your CI score, how to calculate the financial value, and then that public hearing will be on May 28th, and they did just open up the public comment period the other day. That's open until April 6th. Next slide there. So lots of information for the biofuel producers, but it did have like one page about the farmer component. You know, historically it was called climate smart ag. Monty refers to it as regenerative ag. I like that a lot better. I typically just call it low carbon farming practices or low CI feedstock for the farmers. But it did say that they intend for that low carbon feedstock to have a role, and it specifically mentioned no-till, reduced-till, cover crops, and nutrient management. So that was good to see. And it unveiled this new model of this 45Z CF FDCIC, or a new 45Z specific feedstock carbon intensity calculator. We don't know, is that going to be this USDA calculator straight up? It references that the calculator will have to be updated over time utilizing the GREET feedstock calculator, but ultimately we need that new feedstock calculator to come the sooner the better. Hopefully very soon. I know they've been working on it a lot. And then along with that feedstock calculator will be practice definitions, evidence requirements, and the verification protocol. And it said that it would, and Dr. Mueller was talking about it, it'll at least mimic the USDA feedstock rule, but it didn't really clarify, like, is that going to be specifically it or what? But the good thing is, it's farmer feedstock today has a CI score in the upper 20s, and you can't move the needle on it. You got to take the full score as a default. Now there's an opportunity for farmers to be part of a solution to reduce the score. And I'll get into some numbers about what we've seen there. But so now the remaining unknowns is what other practices. So they specifically named the 4, but is it going to be nutrient stabilizers? Is it going to be specific fertilizer rates? Is manure going to be included? How is yield going to be factored in? That we're still waiting on. Mass balance versus book and claim. That's probably one of the biggest unknowns and all this, and we're advocating very aggressively for book and claim. And then the details of the audits and whatnot. Previously, it was ISO 14065, and that was also referenced in this, that the biofuel producers will be audited along those lines, was my understanding. And then, of course, we're still waiting on, is the SAF component going to be increased? Will there be an extension? I did see that SAF Act made some progress here this week in DC to get 45Z extended to 2033, which would be great. Last thing here, so what's next? There's we need the updated 45Z CF GREET, so that's going to be used at the biofuel producer. They need that updated model to remove ILUC and then integrate this new feedstock calculator, amongst other things, I'm sure. We need this new feedstock calculator. Like I said, we need this new rule to go along with it, and then they'll have the public comment period open for another couple months, the public hearing, and then some final guidance after then. I think it was referenced before. Probably won't be a lot of change, but there's still a lot of unknowns, at least on the farmer side. But what we've been saying, there's at least now a pathway for farmers to help contribute to this 45Z opportunity. Farmers need opportunities, and biofuel producers need the tools, right? That's why we're talking about this. Farmers are a big contributor to the emissions as we are given as a default today. And again, I'll share some numbers here in a bit about what we've seen that farmers, I think, can really help lower the score and do it in a way that can make some money for everybody.
Yeah, great. It's nice to see things coming into focus, isn't it?
We're finally getting a little bit of it was a good day. I've had a very good week. I'm very happy.
Yeah, you seem very smiley.
I'm very smiley. I'm usually very optimistic and smiley, but especially this week, I'm very happy.
Yeah, great. Well, Dave, let's get back to your study. One of the things it touched on was new markets and new demand. This could be a solution for some of the demand issues that you identified. So with E15 in the near term, what are some more long-term markets you identified? And I know earlier you did touch on CCUS or regenerative ag, but could you maybe take a minute just to tie some of the things we've been talking about together?
Sure. As I said, E15 is kind of a short-term solution. The good thing is that depending on what you've heard today, it could be rolled out, if it were rolled out relatively nationally. If we could even get in the next year the nation up to Iowa, Minnesota standards, where 30% of the fuel was E15, that actually solves much of the gap in demand for the next couple years. And then it can take several more years to get up towards ramping up. In talking with Monty as we were doing this study, we modeled the transition from E10 to E15 as a 5-year transition. We think that's relatively aggressive. And be honest, we probably would take 7 to 10, but in today's world, things are transitioning quicker. And the fuel companies, if they saw E15 taking off, would actually want to do the blend stock for E15 on a national basis, and it would actually probably hasten that transition because it is cheaper. It has better consumer demand, those types of things, because it has benefits at the pump, all the things we've heard about today. Longer term, marine fuels. Ethanol is a ultra low carbon. Ethanol is a drop-in fuel for any of the engines that can run methanol. They are beginning to switch. In the US, it's going to be a little slower probably of US flagships, but internationally, that switch is happening. And again, 1% of the international marine fuel market is 1 billion gallons of ethanol. And what do we need to increase? If you think about increasing and filling that demand gap, our demand gap is growing at the rate of about 100 million bushels a year, because we're gaining 200 million bushels of production just off yield increases. Yeah, there'll be some ups and downs, but the trend line is pretty solid. We gain about 50 to 75 million in feed and exports and everything else. That leaves about 125 million bushels that have got to find new demand, and the new demand is ethanol. But it's not conventional ethanol, it is ultra low carbon. And so, what does 125 million bushels of corn translate into? That's a 350 to 400 million gallon ethanol expansion every year. That is what we need to fill the demand gap. Well, you could put 400 million gallons into the marine market and it's a blip. Or you split it between marine and SAF and it doesn't affect those big markets either way. In the US, the SAF market is 33 billion gallons of jet fuel. The conversion rate with ethanol to jet ends up being about a billion gallons of SAF. Actually takes 1.6 billion gallons of ethanol, but you get some renewable diesel or renewable gasoline, the other co-products with it. But the bottom line is, if we had 3% of the national jet fuel market, that's a billion gallons of ethanol. Back it off, that's 300 million. Every billion gallons you get there is 2 years worth of yield increase. So it's how do you build these markets incrementally? You start by getting pilot plants, you start by getting the ultra low carbon. We're gonna have 1 billion gallons roughly of ultra low carbon coming out of Nebraska this year. That is enough to start and jumpstart all of these ultra low carbon markets. Now, part of that's going to go to California because of the tax situation, et cetera, but it's there. The LanzaJets, I would hope at some point would switch from using sugarcane ethanol to using ultra low carbon ethanol coming out of US systems. So what's happening in Nebraska really is the switch that just turned. It now opens up all these opportunities. But the big opportunities, huge opportunities ahead of us, they're not going to electrify 747s in my lifetime. Ain't going to happen. But they could go to SAF. The marine fuel, that's going to be a very competitive market. But if they have that initiative to go, all of a sudden, ethanol is the best alternative for switching marine fuels to a cleaner burning fuel. So ethanol is well positioned to capture those markets, but it has to be ultra low carbon.
Great. We're going to continue on the topic of ultra low carbon with you, Joe. Dave was just talking about this market potential, and it's great to hear those concrete numbers behind it. Dave, really interesting analysis. It seems like the Summit project, you're at the beginning stages. So my question is, what message do you think carbon capture and ultra-low CI ethanol send to future rural communities and capital markets?
Good question, Rachel. I think that the domestic demand and export opportunities that David has talked about, I believe we're at an inflection point. And the pipeline is an essential facility to lower that score and access these markets. And it can absolutely change the trajectory for Iowa. I don't want to be sitting here 5 years from now and worrying about our communities getting older, poorer, and fewer, and possibly sicker. We can change all that by embracing this opportunity. From a capital markets perspective, capital markets are intelligent. They understand the financial opportunity, but they need to see the support from our legislative leaders. We have to have rules that we can count on, permits that provide clarity, and the capital will be there to take advantage of this opportunity for all of Iowa. It's exciting to think about, and again, I hope we all can embrace it with tremendous passion.
Thanks for that insight. Tom, similar vein of questioning. So your plant is already benefiting from producing ultra-low CI ethanol. And talk us through, how has that impacted your marketing strategy when you're thinking about markets like California, marine, or
Just
SAF?
like I said, we're having to reevaluate that now as we finally came online. We're getting our full assessment of how low the CI has gone, verifications. But like I said, now we can look at a different product mix where more of our product could be going to Canada, could be going to Oregon, could be going to Washington. And then, as I said before, also there's various people that will continue to be in discussions with, that we've been in discussions for the past 5 years about potentially co-locating, using our ultra-low CI ethanol for a various feedstock for various products. And we're just to keep on hitting on the same message, is that we need to expand the market with this ultra-low CI. But you talk about expanding, I mean, like I said before, Madrid, Nebraska is a village of 250 people. The plant was built in 2006 or 7. It was 200, and the 2010 census, it was 230 people. We're one of the few villages in any part of America that's actually grown over the last 10 years. And the economic support that plant provides for Madrid, like I said, is 250 some people. The county itself is 2,800 people. It is a very, very key part of that part of southwestern Nebraska. And we look at it that way. We look at it as a partnership with the community. It's always been that way with the founders, and we try to work hand in hand with them and the local farmers. So when you talk about what Mitch is trying to do, the whole, if we get the CSA rolled in, we'll be working with them to figure out a way that they can continue to benefit from it if it works. But even with the CSA program, what most people need to understand is we laid out a very large capital expenditure to get the carbon. So when everyone says we have this and you need to be splitting this with us at this rate, it's like, without getting anything proprietary, anybody in our ballpark spent somewhere between $30 and $50 million in CapEx to get their carbon capture equipment in. And so we have to now return that, pay the interest on that, and that is not going to happen overnight.
I want to expand a little bit on this idea of working with farmers. Mitchell, as you and everyone on the stage and everyone in this room knows, farmers, the industry, many of us here have been heavily involved in advocating for 45Z. It's been a long road. And so, maybe I'd ask you to reflect a little bit on that advocacy and how that ultimately influenced the rule that we see now. And then we had another question come in for you. What's the outcome we're looking for here? What's the purpose of all these flights to Washington, D.C.? And the question was, how fast can ethanol plants expect to see a return from 45Z by utilizing farmer involvement?
Yeah, no, great stuff. Yeah, I mean, I started my company 10 years ago as an agronomy consulting company, trying to encourage more farms to adopt regenerative ag systems. I was exploring all these different carbon markets, working with companies like Rabobank and Goldman Sachs and John Deere and Land O'Lakes, and nothing was really working. Then I saw 45Z, and shout out to Mark Heckman. He was one of the first guys that sat me down, and we walked through it, and I'm like, man, this is what I've been looking for my farm. I ran my farm CI score, and it was just the light bulb moment for me. But downloading the GREET model, trying to figure all that out, it sucked. I'm like, this is not gonna fly at scale. So I gotta figure out how to build the software and the systems to be able to do this at scale, and that's what we've done with our software Topsoil. But continuing to advocate, I'm going to DC again on Monday because the fight is definitely not over. For our talking points, we try to be succinct right on the farmer angle of this. I just had one of the meetings with the White House Office of Management and Budget a couple weeks ago. My talking points were two things: include the farmer CI scores and allow us to be able to show the actual CI of the feedstock, and use book and claim. I'm batting 50% so far, maybe allegedly, if the rest of it comes through. So hopefully we get the rest in. But to the point of how soon can this go? We've been building infrastructure, and multiple of our competitors, and we see it more as collaborators. This is such a huge opportunity. Continuum can't do it all. There's nearly 6 billion bushels of corn and soybeans going into this opportunity every year. We can't do it all. We don't need to do it all. So I see this as very collaborative. But we've been helping score farmers. We've scored 400 million bushels per year. The average CI reduction using the current GREET calculator is 18 points of reduction. Under the USDA calculator, though, it's only about 9 points of reduction. So I anticipate, though, this new calculator to be somewhere in the middle, hopefully closer to that 18 on average. And that'll really help to create a nice 45Z credit that I think is a big enough pie to make it worth it. But for us, when the rule goes live, to answer the timing question, we will need a little bit of time to integrate the new model. We anticipate very, very short week or two to integrate the new model. update our MRV protocol. We work with eco-engineers as our auditors, so we're anticipating 4 to 6 weeks to update the MRV protocol, while at that same time collecting farmer data, submit it for audit, and we anticipate issuing verified CI certificates, as all goes well, in a 120 to 150 day time frame. So if it happens soon, I think we could be having those verified CI scores ready for integration at the ethanol plant by late summer or early fall, hopefully before we have to then start on the 2026 crop, because I'm talking 25 crop, and I mean, they even alluded to the 2024 crop having potential here. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of opportunity with that. We're just going to run out of time. But no, we're ready to rock and roll and do this very inexpensively as well. Even at zero cost to the ethanol plants, the farmers will pay for it. We've proven that. So I think there's huge opportunity here, ready to rock and roll and gear up fast. And I think a lot of the farmers are excited to just be part of it too. And all I can say is just the collaboration opportunity being there to contribute and contribute to that ultra low carbon. It's my understanding under the current 45Z CF GREET carbon capture, you guys, Tom and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, the carbon capture lowers the score by 32 CI points. I mentioned the farmers we've seen on average could contribute about 18. Pretty sure that equals 50 points of reduction. We're getting dang close to 0 CI. That would be so amazing. I just see this as a stackable opportunity. I'm just so excited for it.
Late summer, early fall. You heard it here first.
Is this the first time I've said it?
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot.
Great.
My ops team is not here. My sales guys are here. They're excited about that. But
I think I see them heading for the exit.
yeah.
David, we've been talking about CCUS, regenerative ag. I wanted to ask if you could maybe look into your crystal ball and give us an idea of what happens to American agriculture if we don't have access to these tools.
As the slide shows, we think there's 3 pathways out there. The yellow one is the current USDA baseline. It says we're going to live with $4 corn for the next decade. And they do it by cutting acreage 10% in their baseline. Because yields keep going up. And so if demand doesn't increase, and their baseline doesn't really increase demand, in fact, it has some decreases in demand. When you push that out, the only way you balance that to hold $4 corn, which most of us don't make any money at, is to cut acreage. And you cut 10% of the acreage out of Iowa on corn, where's it going to go to? I suspect it won't go fallow. We're going to plant it. So we plant it to what? Beans? And now we got $7 beans. So even a USDA baseline that says $4 corn, that's 10% of your acres got to go to something else. And when you run that back in, it pushes bean prices down. So the picture for Iowa ag from USDA is stagnant to down. The alternative, the red line, is what if we keep acreage where it's at, but demand doesn't grow? We think we go to loan rate corn within 2 years, and we stay there almost forever. You can't get off it without a 1988 type drought, 1983 type drought. The only hope you have is that Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, and anybody but Iowa has a drought. Because the drought doesn't help us if we have it. But the alternative is new demand. That's the green line. If we had E15 year-round and we develop even a couple billion gallons of ultra-low carbon bushels, a couple billion bushels that go to ultra-low carbon over time, I think that's getting up by in case of 2034, it's only about 1.5 billion bushels of corn that needs to go to ultra-low carbon, which is 3 billion gallons or so of ultra-low carbon. That's a $5.15 to $5.75, maybe even a $6 corn market. It's a world of difference, and the difference is, are you at an 8 or 9% stocks to use level, or are you at a 15 to 20, 25% stocks to use level? 1985, 86, we hit 50% stocks to use. This thing can get horrible. How did we get out of it? We idled in 1987, 37% of corn acres went idle nationally. 25% in a set aside, plus we started CRP. And then for years, we idled 1/10 of all US crop acres for 35, 40 years. And we've done the studies. It was devastating to communities, particularly in southern Iowa, North Missouri, etc. I farm in southern Iowa. My nearest machinery dealer's 35 miles away. Most of my beans have to come to Des Moines for a decent market. Now, they did build a new rail thing down at Millerton, but it's 22 miles away. You know, I don't have an ethanol plant within 50 miles of me. So our basis is the worst in the state. So I understand this demand side, and I like the green line. And the green line is all about E15 year-round and a market for ultra-low carbon ethanol that takes the additional bushels. This assumes livestock production continues to grow at 0.25% to 0.5% a year, and that's what it's growing. Exports are at least stable out in the future. Industrial and food demand holds stable. They're not growing. The only growth in demand long term is ethanol, and it's really ultra-low carbon ethanol. These guys are on it. That's the demand of the future, and the demand that can come off of ultra-low carbon ethanol as a feedstock is unlimited. From our perspective today, there is no cap on that. It's a market that will take everything we can produce. The demand for conventional ethanol will have declines ahead of it. E10, if you listen to EIA, they say 44% of our E10 goes away by 2050. I don't believe it because I think they're too strong on their EV adoption. I think it's closer to 15%. I think E10 numbers in 2050 will be 10% to 15% less than they are today. That market will peak and decline. In fact, it may have already peaked in 2025. We may see the liquid fuel market beginning to slowly decline. But the question is, how do we address the new markets, which are the ultra-low carbon markets, which at this point, from an ethanol perspective, are unlimited markets?
What I jotted down was unlimited demand for ultra-low CI ethanol. Sounds okay.
We just got to get there.
So Joe, I asked David to to look in his crystal ball. I'm going to ask you to put on your rose-colored glasses. What does success look like if we're fast-forwarding a decade or two? What does success look like for ethanol, farmers, and states like Iowa if we have the right tools, technology, policy, and partnerships?
I think David's right on track with the curve. I think of it even beyond beyond Iowa. I mean, we are at a point, as we mentioned earlier, we're at a point, and some generations have the opportunity to do something that is purely meaningful in establishing a new golden age. And everybody in this room, we all have children, I'm sure, grandchildren, and we're already thinking about our third generation. I don't want to be sitting here 20 years from now, God willing, and worried or regretting that we didn't make the decisions to lead future generations into the next golden age. And Iowa will be at the forefront of that. I'm an old oil and gas guy, but the blessing of being able to rejuvenate your energy stocks every year rather than dealing with a depleting resource is invaluable. And Iowa can absolutely lead to global prosperity, and I believe that's exactly what's going to happen. I believe everybody in this room will come together. We'll work with our legislative leaders. Summit will work extremely hard to give them the conviction that they need to make these decisions on how we work, how we conduct our business. And I can't wait to watch this unfold.
Great. I think many of us share that sentiment. Tom, I wanted to dig into a concept that's part of the CO2 pipeline conversation, this idea about public benefit of pipelines. Putting aside the debate over carbon reductions, the current administration has touted CO2 used for enhanced oil recovery. There's some speculation about a deal in Nebraska to tap the pipe and convert some of that CO2 into an e-fuel. And so I think, when we're thinking about this concept of public use, what would you say is the distinction between carbon pipelines and crude oil pipelines?
Well, I think first of all, people need to understand that the safety factor of almost all pipelines are better than any normal transportation out there. Safer than truck, safer than rail, safer than barge. So don't get me wrong, there's safety concerns, but I think like we saw in Tallgrass, it sounds like Summit's doing that. They have been addressed, and I think that they have worked with the local communities to try to make sure that they put everyone at ease, and they've worked with all the first responders to make sure that's taken care of. So when they try to differentiate the two, first of all, it's clean biogenic carbon. It is almost to food grade quality when it's being shipped in the pipe. So when people talk about issues tied with, the CO2, I've never really understood a lot of those, and if people have those, I'd love to have, I could have a conversation with them offline. But I do think that promotion of all pipelines is important for the infrastructure going forward. But what you were talking about, the potential CO2, once you have a pipeline, whether it's the one that will get built here or in Nebraska, there's a lot of new technology out there that is looking for clean biogenic carbon as a feedstock. And so you will get, as that technology evolves, you will get those to co-locate, because not all the CO2 will then get sequestered. A lot of it will end up being used for whatever new industrial or technological use that's on the horizon. And I can't give any more details because I've had conversations with certain companies, but there are a lot of different groups out there that have some technology that is slowly getting tested and proven out. So I think it's just like anything else. I think the pipeline, the not in my backyard argument goes on with everything, and then a lot of times we can't really find the logic path of why it's not in my backyard, other than I just don't want it in my backyard.
Sure. Joe, with your background in oil and gas, is there anything you wanted to add to this idea of public use?
I will. To leverage a couple things that Tom said, we, just like Tallgrass, are working extremely close with the IEMA. And those are the leaders that people should look to judge. Again, the pipelines are not a threat. If they were a threat to the communities, none of us would be sitting here today. None of us would be sponsoring them. What pipelines do is introduce risk elements that just need to be embraced and understood. And I'm very confident in the conclusions that the Nebraska safety personnel have adopted. I'm very confident in what the IMA will adopt. The other thing I will talk about from a public convenience, and being in this business for 38 years of building pipe in North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico, I've never been associated with a project that had such a direct economic impact based on what David, Tom, and Mitchell have talked about today on the immediate community where the pipe is built. So don't tell me this isn't a public necessity and convenience. It's that and then some.
Sure. When I first started working on the pipeline issue, I used to describe it as an explosive issue, and I quickly realized I should choose a different adjective.
Yes.
All right, well, we're just about out of time, so I think what I'll do is just go down the line, and if you want to take 30 seconds to address anything that didn't come up in this very informative panel, go ahead and do that. I think Mitchell will start here.
Yeah, no, I think to go along with the theme of our panel, farmers are a tool to meet this ultra low carbon future. Now it looks like we actually will have some rules and a pathway forward to be able to do that. It takes a lot of data, but farmers are ready for it. We're excited to help contribute to that in a scalable, proven, verifiable, traceable manner. And to me, I think there's a huge opportunity here now to grow this pie, and over time it becomes the norm. But what makes me so excited about this whole thing is I come from the regenerative ag space, back to the first question. By proving out here that this can be done, this concept is setting a precedent for, again, the biofuel industry to be a leader, to show how we can decarbonize and make more sustainable this industry, that the livestock sector and food and whatnot can mimic. Exports can mimic the same concepts that we are building here will be used in these other markets. I'm excited to see it all play out.
Tom, any final thoughts?
I would just add that in my 30-plus year career that I've never seen this nexus between ag, energy, and environmental come together more than in this time. And to echo everything that's been said, we have the ability to increase the demand for ethanol, which thus increases the demand for the corn growers of America. And you know, we in Nebraska hope that you guys can get your pipeline put in. We're big supporters. I think you'll find there's been a lot of Nebraska corn farmers that have written letters in support of any pipeline anywhere, because this is truly one of those cases where the rising tide does lift all boats, and that's what we're hoping for.
Longer term, it's $1.50 to $2 a bushel on every bushel of everybody's corn in the state of Iowa. That's the local commitment. We grow 2.5 billion bushels of corn in Iowa. This is a $5 billion issue. It's every corn farmer's issue, because if we don't get the demand, we don't need your acres.
I never thought in my 40-year career in the oil and gas infrastructure industry, I never realized that corn would be the driver for long-term economic independence and national security. That's a tremendous lesson I've learned, and Iowa will absolutely benefit from being in the forefront of making that happen. What a wonderful opportunity.
Great. Well, that's a wonderful note to end on. Panelists, thank you for your insight. Thanks for being here with us today.